Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a retired U.S. Marshal and a newly sworn-in police chief move into their dream home in the Colorado Hills, they expect peace. Instead, they ignite a war with a ruthless HOA president determined to control everything, including land that isn't hers, and she just picked the wrong couple. I never liked fuss. After 2 decades in the federal marshals, I'd had my fill of loud people and bad decisions. When I finally hung up the badge and the pressure, all I wanted was peace, a strong cup of coffee, and a patch of land that belonged only to me and my wife. So, when we bought the house near Pine Creek, up in the Colorado Hills, I thought we'd found our sanctuary. 5 acres, no HOA, private gated driveway, thick forest on 3 sides, and enough space between us and civilization to hear ourselves think. It was heaven, or at least it was supposed to be. The house sat just downhill from a place called Ridge of Echo Pines, a gated community packed with retirees who liked rules, flowers planted in straight lines, and neighbors who all waved at exactly the same angle. We didn't belong to their world, and that was the point. The title to our land was clear. The boundaries were mapped. I double-checked everything myself. I wasn't going to move into a place only to be told what color to paint my mailbox or how long my grass was allowed to be. Not again. We moved in on a Monday. By Wednesday morning, she showed up. I was in the garage, unboxing my tools and wiring up the security system when I heard the first hello. It wasn't the friendly kind. It was the kind you shout when you're not used to being ignored. I peeked out from behind the shelves and saw her through the trees. A compact woman in her late 50s, power walking her way up the gravel edge of our private drive like she owned the damn hill. She wore designer hiking shoes, a pastel windbreaker, and the unmistakable aura of someone who ran a committee, a board, or maybe the entire county. I stayed put. Didn't feel like conversation. She marched up to the gate, glanced at the security camera like it had insulted her, then banged on the metal with the back of her ring-heavy hand. I watched the feed from the wall-mounted monitor and turned the volume up. Her voice crackled through the speaker. "Hello? Anybody home? This is Karen Backman, president of Ridge of Echo Pines HOA. We need to speak." I didn't answer. My wife, Jennifer, was inside the house on a Zoom call with the governor's liaison office, one of those low-visibility, high-stakes video calls where no one smiled. Jennifer had just been sworn in the week before as the new chief of police for our county. No one around here knew her face yet. And Jennifer wasn't the type to open doors mid-sentence just because someone on the other side thought they deserved an audience. Karen waited about 15 seconds before trying again, louder this time. "You can't just live out here and ignore the HOA. We need to verify ownership. I have questions about this property." Jennifer tapped the microphone button on our ring system and spoke clearly. "This is private property. Please leave immediately." There was a pause. Karen blinked, looked directly into the lens, and smiled like she was talking to a child. "Oh, sweetie, that's not how we do things here. This isn't California." Jennifer didn't respond. Karen stood there waiting, tapping her foot like the camera owed her an apology. After a full minute, she turned sharply and stomped down the driveway, muttering something about attitude and mental stability. I watched her disappear back toward the paved path that connected to her HOA. I figured that would be the end of it. Just a bored retiree with a clipboard complex. Harmless. I was wrong. Exactly 6 minutes later, a sheriff's SUV pulled up to the base of our driveway. I stood in the garage doorway as 2 deputies climbed out, one checking a notepad, the other scanning the property. I walked out to meet them, calm, hands visible. Old habit. The younger one nodded. "Sir, we received a welfare call. A woman reported that a resident here may be experiencing a psychological episode, said she was unresponsive, behaving erratically, possibly dangerous." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean my wife, Jennifer?" "Yes, sir. Do you mind if we speak to her?" I gestured toward the front porch. Jennifer had just stepped outside, her badge still clipped to her belt, tablet in hand. She looked at the officers and didn't even flinch. "Jennifer Nash," she said evenly. "Chief of Police for Pine Creek County." The older deputy's expression shifted instantly. "Yes, ma'am. Sorry, we didn't realize." Jennifer held up a hand. "You responded appropriately, but I want that call logged as a false report. This is the first and only warning." The younger officer looked visibly uncomfortable. The older one simply nodded. "We'll handle it, ma'am. Have a good day." They left without further questions. No incident report, no tension, just a pair of very quiet officers who now had a clearer picture of whose property they had stepped on. I went back inside, watched the feed again, replayed Karen's little performance. I already knew this wouldn't be the last time I'd see her face, but she didn't know who she just tried to provoke. Not yet. 6 minutes. That's how long it took her to call the cops. I wasn't surprised, just irritated. It told me everything I needed to know about how Karen Backman operated. She didn't knock to say hello. She knocked to assert dominance. And when that failed, she went straight to dialing 911, not because of any real danger, but because someone didn't bow to her imaginary crown. After the deputies left, I poured myself a black coffee, pulled up the camera logs, and archived everything to 2 external drives. I had spent too many years dealing with people who thought they could bluff their way through authority to leave things to chance. Every frame, every second of Karen's little HOA hissy fit was preserved and backed up. Call it a reflex. Jennifer, meanwhile, went back to her call like nothing happened. That's the thing about her, unshakable. She didn't even comment on Karen until dinner. We were grilling steaks on the back patio when she finally said, "She'll be back." I just nodded. She was. The next morning, I found a sign hammered into the gravel where our driveway met the main road. Red paint on a white background, hand-lettered but meticulously stenciled. Access restricted. Ridge of Echo Pines residents only. I stood there with my coffee, reading it like it was some kind of bad joke. It had a fake HOA emblem on the bottom right, complete with a little pine tree and a copyright symbol. Cute. I didn't touch it. I just walked back inside and printed out a copy of our deed, the county map, and the registered plat that clearly showed our driveway was on private land, never part of the HOA's jurisdiction. I mailed one copy to the sheriff's office with a note about continued nuisance activity and uploaded a scanned version to my HOA nonsense folder. That folder was growing fast. By the end of the week, Karen had gone from sign planning to full-blown neighborhood gossip warfare. One of our neighbors, a veterinarian named Lexi, texted me a screenshot of a post from the HOA's internal app. It was Karen, of course. Just a heads up, the couple who moved into the old Whitmore property have refused to identify themselves. I personally witnessed erratic behavior and verbal aggression. If you see anything suspicious, report it immediately. Better safe than sorry. Jennifer read it over my shoulder and snorted. Verbal aggression. I didn't even raise my voice. She's laying groundwork, I muttered, trying to justify escalation. And escalate she did. Within days, we were hit with 3 anonymous complaints submitted to county departments, all signed Concerned Neighbor. One to Environmental Health, claiming we were illegally dumping waste near the tree line. One to Building and Code Enforcement, reporting unapproved alterations to the driveway. We hadn't touched the driveway. And one to the Water Utility Board, alleging we had tampered with the water meter. All 3 were followed up on. Inspectors came out, asked questions, looked mildly embarrassed. I gave them coffee, showed them paperwork, and walked them through the non-issues. They left satisfied. But that wasn't the point. The point was to waste our time and force us to react. And it was working. Until it wasn't. Because then came the string of 911 calls. The first one claimed there were gunshots coming from our property. The dispatcher sent out a patrol. Jennifer met them at the gate, already holding printouts of our security logs. There were no shots, she said flatly. We have thermal, acoustic, and visual coverage, not a single anomaly. The officers didn't even get out of the car. The second call came 2 days later. Loud party, possible underage drinking. We were asleep. The third call, less creative. Suspicious man with a weapon in the driveway. That man, of course, was me, bringing in groceries, armed with a bag of oranges. Each time, it was a different deputy. Each time, they found nothing. And each time, Jennifer's tolerance dropped by another notch. After the third visit, she stood in our driveway, arms crossed, and told the responding officer, "Log every call. Attach it to my name. Then send a report to Internal Affairs." He hesitated. "Ma'am, that's above my—" "It won't be if she keeps abusing emergency dispatch." He nodded and left. We both knew it wouldn't stop her. Not yet. I stayed up that night, going through camera logs. I pulled license plate captures, tagged motion alerts, audio flags. I dug through public court records on my laptop and started compiling a list of residents from Ridge of Echo Pines. I wanted to know who had received complaints from the HOA in the last 12 months. The database was public. Karen had left a trail wider than her spray-tanned shoulders. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with all of it yet. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let this woman turn our home into a battleground without firing back. And unlike her, I knew how to aim. The folder was now 342 megabytes. That's how I kept track. Not by the number of incidents or how many times Karen's shrill voice rang through our driveway speakers, but by how much disk space her idiocy was taking up. Every video clip, every audio log, every screenshot from the HOA app, every PDF of bogus county complaints, all categorized, time-stamped, mirrored to a backup server, and encrypted. If this ever went to court, the judge wouldn't get a summary. They'd get a digital crime scene. Jennifer and I weren't paranoid people. Cautious, yes. Methodical, absolutely. But Karen had crossed the line from nuisance to harassment. And the one thing I learned in 20 years of tracking fugitives, paper trails burn slowly, but they always burn hot. It was the morning after the third false 911 call, groceries, and the supposed man with a weapon, that Jennifer received an internal ping from dispatch. Not an official notice, just a heads up from someone she trusted. Same voice, different name. The message said, caller ID, masked, claimed to be a concerned hiker. This time, the accusation was absurd, even by HOA fantasy standards. Construction noises at night. Possible human trafficking operation. I nearly choked on my coffee. Jennifer, less amused, said, she's testing limits. Trying to get someone higher involved. Eventually, someone will take the bait. That's when I made the call, not to the police, but to the county office of the Inspector General. I asked for the official process to submit a harassment file related to abuse of emergency services with supporting evidence. The woman on the phone sounded surprised but attentive. I'm not filing a complaint yet, I said. I'm just letting you know what's coming. Then I contacted a contact of mine in the governor's office, retired deputy marshal now working as a liaison in community policy. I didn't ask him to intervene. I just asked him for a name, someone who'd pay attention when HOA power structures started acting like rogue precincts. He gave me 2. By the end of the day, I'd sent 3 couriered packets. One to the district attorney's office marked Attention Civil Harassment Review, one to the State Licensing Board for Homeowners Associations with a notarized summary and 37 pages of exhibits, and one to the Attorney General's Regional Field Office, flagged under persistent 911 misuse, non-member involvement. And still, Karen kept going. She wasn't subtle anymore. That week, a man in a high-visibility vest showed up at the edge of our lot claiming to be from the water district, said he needed to check our backflow system. I asked for ID. He showed me a generic county badge, fine print, completely wrong. Badge said sanitary division, but our county didn't even use that term. I asked who his supervisor was. He hesitated. I asked again. He said, Karen Backman. Just like that. I stared at him. Turn around, I said. Walk off this property right now. Next step is a felony trespass charge. He tried to argue, but he knew he was cornered. He left in a hurry, license plate already captured by my front gate camera. That same night, Jennifer was sitting at the kitchen table sorting through departmental policies when she saw an email pop up in her inbox. Subject line, Urgent Complaint, Officer Misconduct. It had been submitted through the HOA's website form. The sender, a made-up name. The body, a long, semi-coherent screed accusing her of impersonating law enforcement, abusing authority, and threatening peaceful neighborhood elders. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. I can't decide if she's more desperate or more stupid. I checked the metadata on the form submission through the HOA's website. It had come from Karen's IP address, unmasked by a simple trace. She hadn't even used a VPN. We sat in silence for a minute. Then Jennifer said, I'm going to the HOA meeting. I looked at her. You sure you want to step into that cage? I'm not stepping in. I'm going to document it, quietly, as a civilian. It's time to see what this HOA is really made of. I didn't argue. She had the authority, and more importantly, she had the restraint to walk in without starting a war. I spent the next morning preparing a small dossier for her. Nothing that could be considered intimidation, just facts. A printed copy of the plat map, a breakdown of the jurisdiction lines, a list of HOA complaints filed by Karen in the past 6 months, gathered from public records, just in case someone on that board wanted to pretend they didn't know what was going on. Before she left, she clipped her badge inside her bag and said, "I won't show this unless they force me." "They will," I said, "and when they do, don't flinch." She smiled faintly. "I never do." As she drove off toward the ridge of Echo Pines Community Center, I watched her taillights disappear through the trees. Something was about to give. I just didn't expect it to snap so soon. I waited 2 hours before the first message came in. Jennifer had promised to keep her phone on silent but vibrate. She said if anything happened, I'd be the first to know. When her name lit up my screen, I didn't even wait for the second buzz. I picked up immediately. She didn't say hello. "She's unhinged," Jennifer said quietly. She brought copies of fake bylaws to the table and tried to motion for a vote to retroactively include our property into the HOA jurisdiction. I blinked, standing still in the middle of my workshop. Did anyone support it? One guy. Rest abstained. She screamed at them for being cowards, then said I was an armed outsider sent to destabilize the community. I stared at the wall for a second, mouth dry. "And you said—" "Nothing." I smiled. "She doesn't know who I am. Yet." I smiled back at nothing. "Keep it that way. For now." But the restraint wouldn't last much longer. The next day, I received a notice via certified mail, hand-delivered by a man who looked like a third-string extra from a courtroom TV drama. Petition to recognize property within jurisdiction of Ridge of Echo Pines HOA. It was a printout of a forged resolution, complete with a fake community vote attached. 11 signatures. I cross-referenced the names in under 15 minutes. 7 were residents who'd already moved out months ago. 2 didn't exist. It was a paper scam. Sloppy, but dangerous if ignored. Jennifer called it what it was: a hostile bureaucratic land grab. That same night, we found a second sign staked at the bottom of our drive. It read, "Unregistered property, subject to community review. Trespassers may be detained." Not reported. Detained. This wasn't just HOA Karen playing pretend anymore. This was a threat. Jennifer didn't hesitate. She documented the sign, took soil samples from where the stake had been driven in, then pulled footage from our front camera. Karen had walked down with a hammer and stake at 2:13 a.m., wearing gloves, covered head to toe like she was trying not to be recognized. Our infrared cam caught everything, including her muttering to herself like she was building a damn fence in her mind. That same morning, Jennifer called a contact at the state's attorney's office. She didn't file a complaint, not yet, but she submitted a formal inquiry into patterns of intimidation from Ridge of Echo Pines HOA toward non-members. She included the footage, the forged petition, and the sign's language. By the time lunch rolled around, we had a response from the Office of Emergency Dispatch. They'd reviewed 6 separate 911 calls, each traced back to different concerned citizens with different names. All used burner numbers, all connected to the same IP address, the guest Wi-Fi network of the Ridge HOA clubhouse. I stared at the report in silence. "She's using the HOA's internet to file anonymous emergency reports," Jennifer said. "That's official misuse of community infrastructure. If she has board access, she's also exploiting association funds to do it." I felt my jaw tighten. "Can we get that audited?" "We already are," she said. County Treasury's Consumer Advocacy Unit called me this morning. Someone forwarded them our submission. The walls were closing in, and Karen must have known it, because what she did next wasn't subtle. That Friday, a contractor truck showed up at the edge of our property. The driver claimed he was scheduled to survey the land for road expansion. He had a clipboard and a high-vis vest, but no permits, no ID. When I asked who ordered the job, he said, "The community." I said, "Which one?" He paused. "Echo Pines." I asked him to wait by the fence and walked back to the house. Jennifer watched the feed in silence, then grabbed her belt and badge. She walked out, calm as ever, introduced herself, and asked for credentials. The man laughed. "Big mistake." Jennifer's tone didn't change. "Sir, you have 15 seconds to identify yourself and provide paperwork authorizing you to be on this property, or I will treat this as an active trespass and possible attempted fraud." He tried to argue. Jennifer reached for her radio. That's when he panicked. He peeled out so fast he scraped the side of our fence with his bumper. The plate was cleanly caught on both cams. We filed it as attempted impersonation of a public official and submitted the footage. That night, while reviewing our logs, we caught something else, small but telling. A subtle shadow passed by the side of the house. Motion sensor picked it up at 3:21 a.m. 30 seconds later, the camera on our east side caught a figure retreating into the woods. Black jacket, small flashlight, paper in hand. I zoomed in on the freeze frame. Karen, walking off into the trees behind our property, trespassing. Again. This wasn't just obsession, it was unraveling. I turned to Jennifer. We're past warnings. She didn't blink. Let's finish this. We didn't wait for the next attack. It was time to make the board bleed. Jennifer drafted a formal legal notice overnight. 47 pages compiled into a cease and desist packet addressed to the Ridge of Echo Pines Homeowners Association and its acting president, Karen Backman. It outlined every instance of trespass, harassment, defamation, forged documentation, and misuse of HOA infrastructure to target non-members. We delivered it in person. Saturday morning, Jennifer and I drove up to the community center. Not during a meeting, not during business hours, but just late enough to catch Karen doing her usual rounds, snooping through neighbors' yards and pretending she had any authority. She was on the sidewalk, clipboard in hand, pointing at someone's garden gnome when we parked. She froze when she saw us. Jennifer stepped out first, calm, not smiling. She held the packet like it weighed nothing. Karen didn't move. "This is an official cease and desist," Jennifer said, walking up to her. "You are listed individually by name. Do not attempt to destroy or conceal HOA communication logs. Digital preservation orders have been submitted." Karen opened her mouth to speak. Jennifer cut her off. "Anything you say to us will be documented. And Karen, just so you're aware, I'm still a sworn officer even if I'm off duty. You have until Monday to respond through counsel." Karen's lips trembled. "You can't threaten me on public property," she said, voice cracking. "You're right," Jennifer replied, "but you're standing on my property line right now. Look down." Karen blinked, then looked. We had the old boundary line surveyed weeks ago. A discreet row of granite markers lay embedded in the soil, just enough above the grass to be seen up close. Karen took a step back, face pale. I added, "This conversation's being recorded. You've entered private land without consent for the 5th time in 10 days. That's called criminal trespass." She muttered something under her breath, then spun around and stormed off. Fast walk, turning into a wild waddle as she headed back toward the HOA clubhouse. We didn't follow. We just watched. By Monday, we had 2 responses. First came an email from an attorney representing the HOA, clearly not someone familiar with the case. A boilerplate denial, likely copied from a template. No mention of the evidence we provided. No acknowledgement of the IP trace. Just fluff. The second response came in the form of a visit from a sheriff's deputy, but not in a patrol car. He came in a personal vehicle, badge clipped low. I knew him. Jennifer had worked with him years ago. He was courteous but tense. Off the record, he said, "There's been pressure coming from inside the HOA. They're trying to push a narrative that you and Jennifer are creating hostility and interfering with community standards enforcement." Jennifer arched an eyebrow. "Standards enforcement over land they don't control?" He nodded slowly. "They've filed 3 separate nuisance claims with the county and 1 emergency code violation with planning and zoning, all under the HOA's name." I asked, "Are those being processed?" "They're being reviewed, but unofficially." He leaned closer. "Someone high up wants to shut this down before it becomes a scandal. One of your reports reached the state assembly. Karen poked a hornet's nest." That's when Jennifer handed him a fresh USB drive. "Everything we've logged. Video, photos, forged documents, audio recordings, trespass incidents, emergency service abuse, and copies of HOA communications hosted on their server." He took it and gave a small nod. "This is above my pay grade, but I'll make sure it ends up where it needs to go." By Wednesday, things went quiet. Too quiet. No 911 calls, no fake contractors, no signs, no driveway trespass. It wasn't over. Karen had just vanished. And that worried me more than her usual tantrums. Jennifer kept checking the Ridge HOA website every morning. On Friday, the update finally came. Karen Backman placed on temporary leave pending internal review. It was buried in a sidebar under a gardening schedule, but it was real. Except the silence didn't last long. That weekend, someone tried to break into our shed. The lock was snapped, door pried back. No valuables missing, but a clear message. We can still get close. Whoever did it wasn't after tools. They wanted to prove access. And worse, a small envelope had been slid under the shed door. Inside, a single sheet of paper. "This isn't over. Typed. No prints." Jennifer stared at it for a long time, then said quietly, "Let's push the nuclear option." We had been playing defense long enough. The envelope in the shed wasn't just a warning, it was a promise, and we intended to break it. Jennifer's nuclear option wasn't metaphorical. She'd been quietly compiling a dossier for weeks, a full audit of Ridge of Echo Pines HOA's leadership practices, financial records, security access logs, and anonymous complaints made by residents over the last 18 months. And she wasn't just building a case, she was building a takedown. Monday morning, she drove 3 hours north to the state attorney general's office with a flash drive in her purse, a printed binder under her arm, and a meeting on the books with the Special Investigations Unit. While she was gone, I prepared the property for what we both knew was coming: retaliation. I reinforced every camera, replaced lock cores, and installed a set of motion-triggered floodlights along the tree line. I also set up a private LTE backup to keep surveillance running, even if someone cut the power or Wi-Fi. We were no longer preparing for HOA harassment. We were preparing for Karen to lose her mind. Jennifer returned that evening. I was on the porch when she pulled up. "She's going down," she said before I even asked. The AG's office had opened a formal investigation under misuse of nonprofit authority, conspiracy to commit document fraud, and illegal surveillance under state privacy statutes. Our footage of Karen placing fake signs at night included. Her abuse of the HOA Wi-Fi for fake 911 calls included. The video of her fake contractor stammering at our fence every second. And the cherry on top: a former Ridge Board member, someone Karen had pushed out months ago, had already reached out to the AG's tip line anonymously. They confirmed internal misuse of funds, illegal property line alterations, and, wait for it, that Karen had been reimbursing herself for security patrols she never performed. She was cashing checks for driving around the neighborhood in yoga pants with a flashlight, Jennifer said quietly. She was about to expand the HOA border on paper to include 3 new parcels, ours included. I saw the draft application. I froze. "That's land theft." "Exactly," she said. "Under fraud, which makes it a felony." We didn't have to wait long to see her next move. That Thursday night, a group of 5 people showed up at the end of our driveway in reflective vests and hats labeled Community Patrol. One of them had a walkie-talkie, another had a clipboard. They didn't cross the fence line, just stood at the gate, arms crossed, watching. Jennifer grabbed her camera. I got the drone in the air. The moment the drone buzzed into view, the group panicked and scattered. One guy tripped on a bush trying to run back to his car. The woman with the clipboard dropped it. Jennifer recovered it from the side of the road 5 minutes later. Inside, a list of hazard citations for our property, including refusal to engage with HOA compliance, installation of non-approved lighting, and, no joke, excessive gate tone during closing. Apparently, our automatic gate beep offended someone's ears. But more important was the letter attached at the end. An unsigned order recommending the Ridge HOA escalate recovery efforts and initiate legal occupancy review of our land. They were literally planning to try to take possession of our property. Illegally. I looked at Jennifer. She was already dialing. The next morning, a court injunction was filed. By noon, a temporary restraining order was granted against any Ridge HOA official, including Karen, from setting foot on our land, attempting to inspect it, send personnel, or communicate further without legal counsel present. At 3:14 p.m., we watched from the porch as a deputy sheriff taped a copy of the order to the HOA clubhouse door. Karen wasn't there, but her car was. We'd find out later what she was doing. At 5:23 p.m. that day, an anonymous call was placed to code enforcement claiming our guest cabin, a small structure we used for visitors, had collapsed sewage issues and was leaking into the groundwater. 2 county agents showed up the next morning with hazmat masks and scanners. They apologized before even stepping out of the truck. "This happens more than you'd think," one of them muttered. Weaponized bureaucracy. They spent 15 minutes doing a courtesy inspection, found nothing, signed off everything as compliant. Jennifer shook their hands and handed them 2 copies of the restraining order, just in case Ridge tried again. But the final nail hadn't dropped yet. That night, I received a knock on the door at 11:41 p.m. Not a bang, not fists, just a knock. I opened the door slowly, rifle in hand. Karen stood alone on the porch, hair wild, eyes red, voice shaking. "You've ruined everything," she whispered. "You don't belong here." I didn't reply. She pulled something from her coat. A letter? A document? But Jennifer was behind me now, holding her badge, already recording. "Karen Backman," she said, "you're in violation of a restraining order. Step back off this porch and wait for law enforcement. If you move toward us, you will be detained." Karen didn't move. She just stood there, shaking. Then, slowly, she stepped down from the porch and sank to her knees in the dirt. Karen was arrested on the spot. 2 deputies arrived just 7 minutes after Jennifer's call, and they didn't ask many questions. She didn't resist. Not really. She just sat there on the edge of our walkway, arms limp, whispering something to herself as they cuffed her and read her rights. She looked smaller in that moment than I'd ever seen her. No clipboard, no shrieking, no grand performance. Just a broken woman with a single piece of paper still clutched in her hand, later identified as an unsigned claim of emergency temporary administrative custody over our land, filed by herself. She had tried to invent an authority out of thin air and serve it personally, at night, alone. The deputies didn't laugh, but I could tell they were biting back disbelief. By morning, Karen Backman's mugshot was already circulating. Jennifer and I hadn't even poured coffee before the first text came in from a former Ridge board member. "You did it." Within 24 hours, local media picked up the story. "HOA president arrested for attempted land seizure." That headline was tame compared to the truth, but it was enough to open the floodgates. Other residents of the Ridge began speaking out, some publicly, others through anonymous statements submitted to the AG's tip line. Turns out Karen had been running the HOA like a shadow regime for years, holding meetings without notice, pushing votes without quorums, rerouting fines to pet projects, and using compliance patrols to intimidate dissenters. Some homeowners had been too scared to speak, others too worn down to fight. But now, the dam had broken, and it wasn't just Karen in the spotlight anymore. By Wednesday, state investigators raided the Ridge HOA office. Boxes of documents were seized, hard drives, financial ledgers. One of the investigators called Jennifer personally to thank her for the compilation she submitted. It had given them the probable cause they needed to open the warrant. Then came the subpoenas. 3 more board members were served. One resigned immediately, another lawyered up. The third vanished, allegedly fled the state. As for Karen, she was charged with the following: criminal trespass, filing fraudulent property claims, attempted unlawful seizure of private land, abuse of nonprofit authority, harassment, misuse of emergency services, identity concealment in public, office filings, and obstruction of justice for deleting HOA server logs. Her bail was set high. She didn't post it, and we weren't done. Jennifer filed a civil lawsuit on our behalf for emotional distress, defamation, attempted conversion of property, and punitive damages. We also filed a joint class action with 5 other homeowners who came forward with similar stories, each with their own tale of Karen's abuse of power. Meanwhile, Ridge of Echo Pines HOA was in full meltdown mode. With no acting president, the board was frozen. Their insurance carrier issued a notice of potential policy breach due to illegal conduct by leadership. Vendors began pulling out. The community clubhouse was shuttered. And the cherry on top, the county announced a formal review of the HOA's charter for possible dissolution due to gross mismanagement. On Friday, I walked outside to check the mail. An elderly couple I'd never spoken to before waved at me from across the road. "We heard what happened," the woman called out. "Good on you." The man gave me a thumbs up. Later that day, a handwritten note was left in our mailbox. "Thank you for standing up. You weren't the only ones." It was unsigned, but it meant more than I could say. That evening, Jennifer and I sat on the back porch. The sun was setting behind the ridge, painting the sky in amber and violet. We didn't speak for a while, just let the quiet settle around us, not like the silence before, the anxious kind. This one was earned, but it wasn't over yet. Karen still had to face trial, and judging by the DA's filing, they were going to make an example out of her. The courtroom was packed. I hadn't expected a spectacle, but by the time Jennifer and I walked through the courthouse doors that Monday morning, every bench was filled. Local reporters, former HOA residents, even a few out-of-towners who'd followed the case online. A few people nodded respectfully at us. Others just stared. We weren't used to being recognized, but apparently the couple that took down Ridge HOA had become a bit of a symbol. Karen was escorted in through the side. She looked completely different. Pale, gaunt, dressed in beige jail-issue clothing. Her hair was unkempt, and the fire that once fueled her crusade to dominate our neighborhood was visibly gone. She didn't even make eye contact. The prosecution laid everything out. Emails Karen had sent while pretending to be a compliance officer. The fake property claims. Records showing she directed thousands of HOA dollars to personal expenses, including, ironically, a home security fund to protect her from retaliation. Testimonies from Ridge residents were read aloud, one after another, raw and damning. A single mother who was fined into near foreclosure for leaving a stroller on her porch. An elderly man who'd been bullied into repainting his house twice in 6 months. Then came our evidence. The surveillance footage, the forged notices, the restraining order she violated, the attempted administrative seizure of our land. It was surreal hearing it all presented like this. No longer a private nightmare, but a public record of her unraveling. Her defense was weak. They claimed mental stress, miscommunication, misunderstanding of her legal authority, but the judge wasn't having it. At one point, he leaned forward and asked her lawyer plainly, "Are you suggesting your client didn't know impersonating a government official was illegal?" There was no answer. The verdict was swift, guilty, on nearly all counts. And then came the sentencing. Karen Backman was sentenced to 10 years in prison with eligibility for parole after 6, pending a psychological evaluation. She was also ordered to pay restitution to affected homeowners, including us, and barred for life from serving in any governing capacity related to housing, property management, or nonprofits. She didn't cry. She just stood there, still, silent, defeated. As she was led away, Jennifer squeezed my hand. I didn't feel triumph, just relief, closure. In the weeks that followed, the Ridge HOA officially disbanded. A vote was held, and the majority chose to dissolve the organization entirely. The land once misused as community spaces was returned to rightful property owners. Karen's home was auctioned to cover her legal fines. Ironically, the very gate she fought so hard to control was torn down by the county as part of the cleanup order. And as for us, we stayed. We rebuilt. We turned the old guest cabin into a proper studio for Jennifer's work, planted trees where Karen once posted fake notices, and extended the driveway to block any future patrols. People still stop by sometimes, not out of curiosity, but gratitude. We became something we never set out to be. Proof that bullies can be beaten and that private property actually means something in this country. One morning, I found a small stone left near our mailbox. It had a message painted in white. Stand your ground. Whoever left it didn't need to sign it. We knew exactly what it meant.